the first day of August, so and the last month of winter, thank goodness, and then we get into the real pointy end. 3 games of AFL footy to go. The AFL ladder is a fascinating look. If you're one of those people that like to look ahead, then you'd be tying yourself in knots trying to work out who's going to finish where, because I don't know how you do it. I think 1 week ahead at a time, but the run home becomes very, very interesting given results on the weekend, and this is where the buck stops. Here starts Nathan Buckley to look at the big 5 issues for him out of the round, Bucks.
Gaz, we're going to start with the Swans. They have had what I would suggest is the most under-the-radar month, but potentially have set themselves up for the finals and a real crack at the flag in 2022.
They've got North Melbourne at Marvel, they've got Collingwood at the SCG, they've got St Kilda at Marvel.
And I think that they've had a relatively easier draw, but the fact is that they're a good young team that have now reinforced exactly what their DNA is, and their DNA is pressure. They're the number 1 pressure team in the competition across the season. They're the number 1 team in the pressure differential across the last month, and 3 of their best 5 performances for the year have come in their last 4 games. So they have ramped up. They've narrowed their focus on, we are going to put absolute heat on the opposition, and that's going to kickstart our game. And
defensive integrity is intact, given that they've played the Dogs, kept them to 67. The Dockers, they've kept them to 65. The Crows, 85, and then on the weekend the Giants were kept to 39 points.
And we've been waiting for. I've been waiting for this because I think the Swans have had. I think they've just been idling. I think they've been a V8 that's been running on 5 or 6 cylinders. There's been something that's been missing. And if the pressure factor and their absolute heat on the opposition is what's going to unlock their natural contested ball winning, but then their offensive flair coming back the other way, well, then they put themselves right in the mix fairly and squarely for September.
Yeah, I'm with you on them. They're going beautifully. They've been under the radar, maybe because they haven't been in the high-profile games, but the way they've won suggests that they are gearing towards something pretty serious.
Something underneath that is they're actually the best. They're the best balanced side in transition of offense and defense in the last 8 weeks. So where Fremantle were number 1 in the first half of the year, nice. Sydney have taken over from that. Secondly, Patrick Dangerfield becomes such a massive X factor. Now we look at this bloke; he's a champion of the game. He's obviously been a consistent contributor to his teams both in Adelaide and Geelong. But his performance on the weekend highlights what he could be for Geelong over the next 6 or 7 weeks. So finals are about contested ball and winning key contests, and that's what Patrick Dangerfield can provide. He's a clearance beast. We haven't even seen him or the need for him to go forward yet in amongst Cameron, Hawkins, Stengel, Close, who've got a really established forward line there that are scoring heavily. He can still go forward and do that. His game time on the weekend, he played 76% in the first quarter, 60 in the second, 75 in that third quarter that Bevo was talking about. But he only played 63% game time across those 4 quarters.
Time will tell us, Bucks. Time will tell us, and you only get judged on one thing in this caper. And we know Chris Scott's winning percentages and all that, but his critics still point to the fact he's only won it once. So time will tell. But right now, it is shaping as one of the most beautifully timed runs to the business end as a team collectively, and also from the individuals within it. And they've held him back, and they've given him an extra week and limited game. So the judge, we'll make our assessment in time. But right now it is credit to Chris Scott and all of those at Geelong.
He might feature a little bit later in the Buck stops again.
No, sorry.
Number 3, the Brisbane. How good's footy? Brisbane-Richmond game at the MCG. I just loved to see this game, and there's so many storylines that came out of it. It is, and their first half looked like it had answered that. Danaher, Hipwood, they stand up. Cameron kicks straight. Rayner looks up and about. Their midfielder giving them supply. So that's a story out of it. Bailey's injury concern is one. Dylan Grimes' injury. What does that mean for Richmond? But Richmond stand up. They do that off the back of their pressure. They raise the fight, which is what the term that they've used in the past, and they out pressure one of the top 4 sides in the competition, and they're able to turn around a 42-point deficit to get it done. Noah Cumberland, young fella, kicks 5 goals, and they get busy. Lynch stands up. Riewoldt stands up. Shai Bolton just looks like, my God, what's he going to be? and as Fags mentioned, celebrating the 300th game of Shane Edwards, which is one of their favourite sons. But there was so much alike about that game, that contest at the MCG. It's a reminder of what we think we're going to get over the next bit of time. All right, the fourth one is about Geelong and Joel Selwood and how they handled that. I look at from afar and I look at the Geelong Footy Club, not just about their on-field performances, but their admin, how they set themselves off-field, how they handle different situations. I think they do it with class, and I thought what we saw with Joel Selwood after the game on Saturday night was amazing. And even Chris Scott was asked about milestones. Do you find, are you a subscriber to finding a little bit extra? And the answer is no. How can you find extra 5% in a milestone that you're not going to play in another game? But I thought that, I just look at it, the way their admin is set up, the way that ground is, they have a favourable schedule because they have home ground advantage, but when they travel, they're not losing advantage when they come up to the MCG as such. The jury is out around the finals performances, but that's still there for them to chase. Last year there's some scuttlebutt around the coaching group and Scarlett and Enright potentially not being really tight with Chris Scott and having a difference in philosophy.
Aligned.
Geelong handled crisis as well as anyone. That didn't blow out and didn't affect the way they do things. So even that, when things aren't going well, they handle it well. They're a tight-knit organisation on and off the field, and they get things done. I'm interested to see how they go. Lastly, mate, is Carlton. I think they're a very interesting study. 12 wins has put them in a position where they have a crack at playing finals. They've been touted as top 4. Will they miss the 8? But there's a few question marks for the next 3 weeks against them as they take Brisbane next week, then Melbourne, then Collingwood. 3 blockbusters for them to finish the season off.
I'll just give you the run home. Brisbane at the Gabba, Melbourne at the MCG, and given results, if they go probably according to favouritism, they'd have to beat Collingwood at the MCG on round 23.
I think that we will see that game in round 23, and I reckon we'll see that repeated as the first final. Yeah, Collingwood, I think, will be hard pressed to finish top 4 given the draws of theirs and the others around them, and I think Carlton will make the 8. So, and I'd fully expect that they'll be in the bottom 4 together, in the 5th to 8th together, and I think we might see a repeat. But Carlton are the second best contested ball side in the comp. They're the second best clearance side in the comp. They're the 9th worst offence, the 11th worst D in terms of defending chance. So in contest, they're great. In stoppage, they're great. In transition, it's always been a watch to see whether they can build an effective and efficient unit to play the transition game, which is where sides like Geelong and Richmond, Collingwood lately, Melbourne have been elite. Yep. So the jury's out on that. They still need to develop that, and they need to improve that if they're going to challenge the best sides when they get to September.
And I think that's a great assessment. I think that's, I'm really bullish on Carlton, and I love their personnel, but what you've just said then is a great assessment and why they are where they are. Is that, we sat back and gone, gee, and he has done a great job. He's got them playing the way they play, but they were in the market for a new coach for a reason. Because they didn't have everything right. And to expect one coach or a new coaching group to have it all right in the first year by, round 20 when you start playing against all these really good sides would have been, probably beyond the expectation. So what they've done has been great. They have got some flaws. They have got. That's why they've changed coaches a couple of times, because there's some embedded issues at their footy club and their playing group for a while, and to change those behaviours and thought process will take longer than a year. So to be where they are is great. Now what happens in the next 3 weeks will be interesting.
Well, their best footy is as good as any.
Yeah.
As good as anyone's going around, but and that's when you get to finals, that's important because you need to know that your high water mark is going to, when you turn it on, is going to challenge the best sides. And I think Carlton know that. But it's how good is their median level.
Yeah.
And as Vossi said, and as we saw, Carlton supporters or football lovers watched, when the pressure is not there, when their contested ball and clearance is not at the elite level, where do they fall back to? There's that efficiency in their game, in general play, is not at the level of the top 4 sides.
Yeah, and I read where Kingy said it was arrogance that they thought that they could just roll up and beat Adelaide. I would imagine there's an element of that thrown in as well about learning new games and all that, and then going in and being able to deal with expectation, which takes us to Adelaide and how competitive they've been. And they've had moments where you wonder whether they're stagnating or not. But for a young side, I think that they're tracking okay. Jimmy Bartell he's the footy director at the Giants. He's backed up what Mark McVeigh said, heart and soul man, speaks his mind. So by extension, this is the interesting thing, and this is what I want to talk to you about. He's named 8. So these are the players that don't. And these are the players that now fall into the category of having checked out, or the question mark, rather, is raised about. Now, obviously there are some young kids in here which he wouldn't be pointing the finger at, but I'll go through them. O'Halloran, Lloyd has been around a long time. Taranto has been one that's been questioned about whether or not he's looking to come back home. So he's squarely in the sights. That is, for Tim Taranto, something to deal with.
Yes.
Ash is a youngster. Weir's a youngster. Himmelberg, old enough. Aaliyah, a youngster. Cumming, been around long enough. Haynes has been around long enough. Bruce has been around a long time. Tom Green, who got dropped last week, who gets back into the side
by omission,
who's who should be a generational leader and midfielder for that side, has now in 2 weeks been dropped and now been publicly questioned about whether or not he's checked out. Peatley's a youngster. Hopper is in the Taranto category. Brown, a youngster. Hopper and Taranto, 2 blokes that have been queried about whether they're going to stay or not, and now being publicly questioned of whether or not they've checked out by the coach.
That's over half their midfield too.
So how do you recover? Well, I don't say how do you recover. Give me the atmosphere of that. Let's say this morning's the first time they get together. Firstly,
I admire that is a courageous thing to put out there. Now,
by Mark
McVeigh. Now, whether it's good for the club, I think it's good for everyone in terms of the playing group, the club in general, the coaching staff, to actually be able to have real conversations about where they're at. Now, if their performance hasn't been up to standard, well, it's the coach's responsibility to call it out. And
publicly, and by naming them and by omission, that becomes like, if I'm Tim Taranto, that is, or Jacob Hopper for that matter, or Tom Green for that matter, that's an indictment on me.
By omission, he has mentioned them, but I think he wanted to. When you go in, so as a coach, you're going, okay, if it's an effort issue, you'll often go, okay, who ticked trademark and who didn't? So who are the players that played the way that we want to play?
Yep.
And you put the magnets over there and the other guys. That doesn't mean that these guys are embarrassed at that stage. But they're saying, like, you've fallen short today.
No, we've all been on that list. I have,
and
you have.
That's the way I felt it came across.
Rarely comes out publicly that he lumps you into the list, and then not only about that, checking out of the year with 3 games still to play.
I reckon Mark McVeigh said what everyone knows anyway, and that is, if you don't have a coach for next year, if there's not a purpose beyond this next 2 or 3 games, or even what are we actually doing in this? And the fact that it's a game against Sydney is why he's probably so
professional integrity
wound up. Oh, absolutely professional integrity, mate. But even with that, you still need to be a part of something bigger than yourself. Now, they are part of an organisation that is, at the moment, that is in limbo. They don't know who their coach is next year. They haven't really given the players a lot of clarity. The coach's job and the footy department's job is to set their players up to succeed. My question would be, and I'm not letting the players off for poor effort because that's their responsibility and, as you said, their professional integrity. But the club's job is to set the players up to succeed. And I don't think that the GWS environment, given they don't know who their coach is going to be, I don't know if they know how their football department's going to be set up, I don't reckon they give their players the best chance to succeed right here, right now.
Should they have kept Leon?
I don't think... I think this is just a transition situation you need to find yourself in, because with the scuttlebutt that was going around about Leon, if they made the decision on Leon, I think it was better for him not to coach this second half of the year.
Okay, I think you've let them off the hook, the players.
No, I'm not. I don't think that the players should be let off the hook, but it's not our job to be critical of them as such. It's the coach's job, and as you said, when they walk in today, the challenge, the vision, what they see, the feedback from the coaches and their peers, what their expectations were going into the game and what they produced, that's the gap that they need to be coached on, and it's a development opportunity.
It is as public a damning an assessment, again, by omission, and I'm talking when you name names, as I can remember for a while, because that, but you're listening to that says to me that Spike was considered enough, and he would have known, he's been around footy for a long enough time to know that when I go down this path and say there's players checked out and I name 8, then I am acutely aware that this is putting the crosshairs on Taranto. It's putting the crosshairs on Hopper. It's putting the crosshairs on Tom Green, players that they all would be.
And Himmelberg, who's been by any level has been fantastic since being moved into the back line.
How do they come up for this week? Those players. So they're looking at the coach going, well, and if they didn't check out, I don't know if they did or they haven't quite seen it all. They go, I didn't check out, a bad game, but I didn't check out. And then you go, okay, well, talk about professional integrity. Life was good when Spike took over and they played all the the lower teams and it was freewheeling, let's all go from the back half and kick big scores and everyone's happy. And then when there's a challenge against the hard-nosed Sydney side, and then you're accusing them of checking out, that's an indictment on you as a footballer and a person.
Well, what about we look at the flip side and say, well, what Mark McVeigh has put on the table has actually made the next 3 weeks compelling viewing.
Yeah,
and
now
I'm
not having a go at Spike.
Well, and the players are on the hook now to what do you stand for? What are you going to bring to the table? So when they play Essendon up at home on Saturday afternoon, not only will you find out about the individuals and of how they think of themselves and how much pride they have as individuals, but you'll find out how committed they are to the team and to the club, and you'll find out how much influence Mark McVeigh has as a coach. There was Rui said on Best on Ground that it's hard for Mark McVeigh to be seen as a prospect for coach next year because of those comments. If the players aren't buying into him and are checking out and he's calling it out, then it makes his situation for next year almost untenable.
As a coach at the Giants.
Yeah, but as you sit here, you flip it. He's coaching hard and he's now giving his players a platform to have a real crack in the next 3 weeks to actually give him a chance to be the senior coach beyond this.
And then in the ruthless industry that we're in, those comments for me also give Richmond, for example, I don't know about Richmond, but I'm using them as an example of the rumours that you hear. If you're interested in Tom Green before the weekend and those comments, then now you are going as hard as you possibly could, or Taranto or Hopper for that matter. Whoever's the teams that are said to be interested in them, you're going, right, this is where they see you, whether you're in there or not, but here's your opportunity. I mean, for the next coach coming in, I think it's a really interesting play. I'm not critical of it. I just think it's a fascinating insight, and I'll be interested to see how they when the teams come out on Thursday night, out Taranto, Hopper, Himmelberg.
Well, you're not going to drop Himmelberg. He's been your best player.
Well, he's one of the ones that he's by omission. But says he's checked out. But
the question wasn't. You're making a really clean line between the players you named and the players you didn't get effort and energy from this game.
So maybe not all of them have checked out
directly to checking out for the season.
Well, that's what happens when you delineate.
But we're putting two things into the mix and assuming whatever is it, that all of those players that Mark McVeigh said that all of those players have checked out.
That's what happens when you delineate in the manner that he did.
That's what happens when you cut and paste a press conference after the game.
No cut and paste. They're his words.
He said that is it a question about the players checking out, and then he said these are the only players that I thought stood up tonight.
Who checked in?
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that the players he doesn't mention he thinks has checked out for the season. He just said they didn't stand up tonight.
Oh,
there's
no. He's asked about one of the great challenges for him now is dealing with who has checked in and who have checked out.
You can cut and paste an even better story than his, and it's a great story as it is.
No, don't have to cut and paste.
It's gonna be.
A coach has named 8 players. By omission, it puts the heat on the other 14.
Agreed. I didn't care for GWS for the rest of the year because we're looking at sides that are going to contend into September. We're looking at sides that are on the cusp of the 8 that might make their sides like Hawthorn, Essendon, even with their run, they've been a little bit off grid. Adelaide have been impressive, but they're not going to play finals. North Melbourne are down the bottom and West Coast. GWS have been in that mix, but I want to see their game on Saturday afternoon to see how they respond. So it's a brilliant piece of marketing.
I want to see the teams when they come out on Thursday night. That's what I'll be looking for.